Some really interesting stuff has been happening over at Forbes. You see this headline here, this article. The Acolyte Rotten Tomatoes score keeps falling, and maybe it should if we ever hope to find balance in the Force. Now, I think that's fine. I think that's true, quite frankly. But then there was also an article on Forbes from someone else who said it's very clearly review bombing. It's just review bombing. Yep. Yeah. It's like Forbes, I understand they're contributors and they're just sort of posting stuff, but obviously the editor-in-chief needs to get this under control because it's like schizophrenic. I love it. I think it's hilarious. But I thought we'd take a look at this particular article today because it is comical. I think it's true, and I think it takes it from a relatively neutral standpoint. So, yeah. Hit subscribe if you're new here, guys. Turn the bell notifications on. Let's dive right into it, shall we? So, as I said, the headline is, it is the content of the article. You know, the Acolyte Rotten Tomatoes score keeps falling, and maybe it should if we ever hope to find balance in the Force. Companies deserve to get ground into the dirt to really learn their lesson. Like a company like Disney, after so long and so many fails, they still haven't learnt their lesson? No, so absolutely should just keep falling. There's a great disturbance in the Force. When it comes to fandoms, few are as divided as Star Wars, where it seems every new release or announcement is met with its very own little culture war. It's only getting worse. It's not hard to see why. So again, this guy's kind of on our side, I think. I say our side. Just a normal standpoint side, just as an FYI. The vision of what a galaxy far, far away should look like differs wildly from one person to the next. That's a top-down problem in many respects. Disney's sequel trilogy was a jumbled mess. Even its various creators couldn't agree on where the story was going. This is true. Let alone what this new revived version of Star Wars ought to become. I'm still baffled that Kathleen Kennedy and J.J. Abrams and the rest of the sequel trilogy shot callers didn't come up with a coherent 3-movie story from the get-go. Do you remember this? They were literally making it up as they went along. Do you remember this? They admitted to making it up as they went along. Why? For movies that cost so much money, why on earth would you do that? Like, that's a managerial... it's just managerial cancer, isn't it? Like, why would you do that? It's just nonsense. It's one of the greatest unforced errors of modern cinema. So much potential squandered as a Star Wars fan since far back as I can remember. It's just another heartbreaker. But hey, somehow Palpatine returned. I love that. Somehow Palpatine returned. Like, for fuck's sake. Disney launched its streaming service, Disney Plus, and loads of shows. But they say this: the Force divided. And again, this is very neutral. I like this. I think this is a really well put together article. Since then, it's been a pretty mixed bag, and that's putting it mildly. Rise of Skywalker's a mess, a hodgepodge of competing visions that left the fandom deflated. On the streaming side, however, things were a little bit brighter. It didn't last. The Mandalorian had 2 pretty strong seasons, but fell apart in season 3. Book of Boba Fett was a weirdly feckless affair that did little to encourage fans that Disney was a coherent vision for the space opera. True. The show was only partially saved by the arrival of Mando, but even then it undid much of what the Mandalorian's second season set up with Luke Skywalker, effectively just handing Grogu back rather than training him in the ways of the Jedi. It was clear that Disney wasn't interested in taking narrative risks, playing it safe at almost every turn. Then Obi-Wan Kenobi with Ewan McGregor. That was, obviously popular Jedi Master. Wasn't enough story in the series to fill one decent movie. The rest was filler. Young Princess Leia was a massive misfire. That's very true. More's the pity. At least we know she grew up to be one of the most awesome characters in all of Star Wars. This is true. And then we have this. Ahsoka had its moments, but the only moments were Rey. Not that one. The good one. The chap. I can't remember his character's name anymore. But, yeah. Anyway. Dave Filoni's attempt to make the leap from Rebels to Clone Wars to live action never quite worked. Something has lost in translation. Only Andor really stuck the landing. I agree. Because it had incredible writing. You see, I like this. I like the cut of this guy's jib. He knows what he's talking about. But it was headier stuff than many Star Wars fans were accustomed to and many past. Cassian Andor is a minor figure in the big scheme of things, and there were no Jedi, no lightsabers, no Sith. It was a masterpiece, a diamond in the rough, but not necessarily a crowd pleaser. This is true. No new movies, and then we get to the Acolyte points. So it's little wonder that the Acolyte has now been so divisive. It's made my own feelings about the show well known. I'm one of the few critics out there who finds it incredibly bland and poorly written. Fans, on the other hand, have taken to Rotten Tomatoes and social media, and many are unhappy. The way the culture wars have taken root in pop culture, the debate around the Acolyte has become, shall we say, fraught. The fandom menace? ? That's not a thing anymore. Even on IMDb, the audience scores reflect a growing disenchantment with Star Wars, where the Acolyte has a meager 3.3 out of 10 rating. Does it deserve this lower score, or a 13% user score on Rotten Tomatoes, in stark contrast to its 85% critic score? And I like this. He says probably not. He says I rate it somewhere around the same quality as Boba Fett or Obi-Wan. Quite poorly, in other words, but not necessarily any worse than that witch chant takes the cake for cringiest Star Wars moments since Disney took over. This is not necessarily a reflection of the Acolyte's quality in a vacuum, however. This is the result of years of growing apathy and dismay. I will agree with this to a degree, although I do think it is... I mean, it is arguably worse than Obi-Wan and Boba Fett, I think, personally. These super low scores, following a flood of reviews, over 25,000 on Rotten Tomatoes, far more than most Star Wars shows, is referred to as review bombing, and that's a fair description. But I think review bombing has a place in modern online culture. I don't believe it's entirely trolls giving the show bad reviews. I don't think it's just a bunch of racists and sexists either. Sure, they're out there, and they certainly make their unpleasant views known. This is true. Nor do I think we should simply write off these reviews as dishonest or politically motivated. For many of us, there is simply a sense that the Star Wars we knew and love, or have loved for decades, since we were but young Padawans, has been utterly changed for the worse by people who don't understand or appreciate what made this franchise great to begin with. Do you see, he does know what he's talking about. You know, this is a mainstreamer from a very big website that does, you know, he knows what he's talking about, and he's, I guess you could say, on our side, as it were. Frankly, this sense of crushing disappointment has been with me since long before the House of Mouse got its greedy mitts on Star Wars. The prequels were a huge letdown, perhaps the greatest letdown I've ever felt at the movie was The Phantom Menace. Worse, George Lucas' edits to the original trilogy remain, in my humblest of opinions, a uniquely terrible tragedy of meddling and arrogance. I'll agree with that. The fact that I can't watch the original trilogy on a 4K Blu-ray disc makes me horribly, unreasonably sad. I discuss more of this, and why I think fans would welcome diversity and strong female protagonists in Star Wars if only Disney took a radically different and, dare I say, radically more lucrative approach in a newsletter. For now, we can only hope, blah, 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 Lucasfilm pays more attention, blah, blah, blah. So basically, you know, he's completely right, and he's completely, again, I don't want to say our side, because, you know, is it our side? It's just common sense. You can't keep beating people into the dirt and then expecting them to be like, yeah, this is fine. Like, no. At a certain point, people snap, right? And then people sort of, I guess the amount that they will give leeway to snaps as well. But I do like this article. I think it's good. And it's interesting to watch the sort of schizophrenia at Forbes play out, when one posts a good article lambasting people for their reviews, then another posts an article going, no, these are justified. It's very, very comical stuff. You should keep an eye on Forbes. It's very, very fun. Anyway, do hit subscribe if you're new here, guys. Turn the bell notifications on. Drop your thoughts down below. I just thought this was a bit of fun anyway. But thanks. Take care. Bye-bye now.